Today, we are quite fortunate to have in conversation former Illinois Congressman Adam Kinzinger. Congressman Kinzinger served in the Air Force and rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel. He was congressman from Illinois from 2011 to 2023. The congressman has always put service and principles first, which I guess is why he's here with us today. That was most put forward when he showed real political courage by serving as one of two Republican members of the House Select Committee to investigate the events of January 6th. And that, to me, makes him a genuine American hero. Now, if you want to read more about his life, you should pick up his book, a best-selling New York Times memoir, Renegade, Defending Democracy and Liberty in Our Divided Country. And he's also got a children's book called Paws of the Republic, which I presume is about a cat, which introduces young readers to civic values and the importance of democracy. The congressman will be in conversation with Emma Petty Adams, who's executive director of Mormon Women for Ethical Government. And she brings experience in civic government, engagement, coalition building, and strategic communications. So I will now turn it over to you. Please join me in welcoming Emma and the congressman.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. By the way, the children's book is called That's What Heroes Do, just so you know. And it's out May 5th. And it's really good. No cats. I don't like cats, sorry. Okay, Emma, please.
Neither do I. I actually am very allergic to cats, so we're in agreement here. So we actually have a few things in common. One is that not the cat thing. The other thing is that we first met a few years back at a Principles First event where you were launching Country First. And at that event, it was your birthday, and it was my birthday.
Yeah, we're birthday twins.
So we share a birthday.
Yeah.
But it gets even better because I'm a bicentennial baby. And that means that I'm turning 50 this year. And it also means that I was born to be patriotic. It was just in me. And we also share the political party. I registered Republican the day I turned 18. So I want to ask you about that word, patriotic. It is a word that perhaps in the past was an easier one to define. Do you still claim that word? And if so, has it changed for you over the past decade?
Yeah, it's a great question. And yes, I claim it because I refuse to let the bad guys claim it, right? Like when they called themselves patriots when they were storming the Capitol, like I feel like, and clearly they did massive damage to the word patriot, right? You think about what's the white racist group, Patriot Front, and all that kind of stuff. And I think it's really essential actually for us as kind of pro-democracy loving people to not let them own that word. Because patriot actually has a really amazing history, right? You think about the revolution, we fight to throw off a king. No kings in this country. They were the patriots fighting, the patriots at Concord Hill. And so to me, it is really important that, and that's why I'm glad you asked it, it's really important that we maintain ownership of that word. You can call yourself a patriot and be a far-right agitator that doesn't believe in democracy. I can't stop you with the First Amendment from saying that. But the reality of it is, patriotism is defined by throwing kings off, throwing kings out of this country, and believing in democracy and the importance of the people. And so how has it changed for me? I think the main way is just over time what I thought would be kind of automatic. You join the military, you fight for your country, you believe in democracy, you're a patriot. We now have to think through deeper, right? Because again, so many people have claimed that title. And to me also, I would hear when I was younger people that said like dissent, what would they say? Like dissent is patriotism. And I never understood that, right? I'll be honest with you. You see raised up, you see the Vietnam protest, and they're like, that is a patriotic protest. I would always be like, well, how is that a patriotic protest? And I think what's happened for me is I've grown to understand that that is a patriotic protest. That people having an opinion and being willing to operate within the bounds of what this country has set up is patriotism. And so I think my definition of it has broadened a little bit. And I also want to say very quickly, I have a good friend here that is, in my mind, a real patriot. And his name is Trevor Reed. And Trevor Reed was, you all may know his story. He was in a Russian prison, wrongfully captured. He was there for a few years, got traded out under Joe Biden, and then he actually went to Ukraine and fought for the Ukrainians, and he has a book out called Retribution. But anyway, Trevor's here, and I just wanted to point him out. And that's to me, I say to me, he's a real patriot. He fought for the United States of America, but he went and he was obviously abused by the Russians and in their prison, by being locked up. But then he came out and he fought for Ukrainians for their freedom. And so to me, that is a broad definition of patriotism. That may be a long answer to what you want, but that's how it's evolved for me.
No, I love that because it's an answer that shows growth and development. And I think that's what we all want as humans, is to grow and develop. So is it fair to say that maybe in the past you felt like patriotism was maybe a little bit more owned by your side?
Yeah.
And now you feel like we should all own it?
Yes, and let me use this example. If you were raised in here kind of on the right spectrum, or you were raised on the left spectrum, okay? You probably were raised in an environment where you saw the other side as unpatriotic, right? And that's just kind of the definition of the politics, how we have it, right? The right believes the left hates the country. The left believes the right hates the country as it exists today. One of the things that's been amazing to me is, as this pro-democracy coalition has been built, talking to people that were not raised in the same environment as me, or maybe raised with a different political viewpoint, and recognizing they love their country as much as I do. And I think for those of you that are raised in one perspective or another here, now that you've been involved with this pro-democracy coalition, I hope you also have had the ability to look and say, hey, that person that actually 10 years ago we'd have been on the opposite ends of a political campaign, I recognize they love America. Now, I will caveat that and say, if you're taking over the Capitol building on January 6th, I do not believe you love America, and I do not believe you are a patriot, because I think it is essential that you operate within the Constitution that, from 250 years ago to today, people swear to protect and defend. But yeah, it's been amazing, because I was raised to believe that, we are the patriotic side, and I've come to realize, actually, the left is as patriotic as the right ever was.
Okay, so we've established that you're in a room full of patriots, and we're all each defining that according to where we are in our journey. So there was a conversation earlier about the rule of law and the judiciary, and that is obviously one branch of government that is, I think, holding up quite well in this moment, all things considered, under executive pressure. You have the executive. I think we can all agree that executive pressure is at its most extreme it's ever been, even those of us who were questioning executive power, in previous generations. So what can a group of patriotic Americans do to reinvigorate Congress, which is the people's branch? We cannot exert pressure like we would wish to on the judiciary or the executive, as much as we would love to be able to pull up and, to the White House and say our piece. But we can and should be exerting pressure on Congress. So what would you say to this group and to Americans who are watching about what they can do on that front?
So let me say the very first piece of advice is to take that burden that you carry on your shoulder every day, that saving this country depends on you. We all carry this, right? We all feel like I've got to do another tweet or another email or something, and we exhaust ourselves. We carry this massive burden and we weigh ourselves down. take that burden and drop it, okay, first off. Because I think here's the thing, here's the reality of what we're in. We're in a moment where I believe, this steam train of destruction has been moving, or freight train of destruction has been moving, and we finally are starting to put the brakes on it. And I think when, there's a new Congress, I think the brakes will be put on, but there is still momentum behind a train with its brakes on. So there's destruction that's going to happen, and I don't want to gloss over that. But the reality is the other side will win if we get exhausted and if we give up. Because to them, to the chaos wing of the GOP, which is almost the whole GOP now, to the chaos wing of the GOP, all of this chaos, all of the craziness, all of Donald Trump waking up and deciding 15% tariffs now, not 10 because he's a 4-year-old boy and he wants to, I can do this. All of that is energizing to them. It's like a Coca-Cola with cocaine in it to them, okay? You and I get exhausted by it. So the very first thing is our main goal here is to survive this era with our determination intact, okay? That's number one, and that is the most important. If you do nothing else, it's that. Because how many of you know people in here that have given up on politics? Everybody, I think, knows at least one, and you look at the number that represents. Second is, yes, Congress is this nebulous thing out there. Everybody knows their congressman, but they don't know Congress, and so it feels untouchable. The reality of it is it's not. Congress folks actually represent not their districts, because they clearly don't, but they represent the party interests in their districts. And so I think the recognition that you can make a difference when it comes to a congressional election is important, but most importantly, if you want to affect it, is when you go out to do things like visit on Capitol Hill, for instance, and you are from the district and you meet with either the congressman or you meet with the staffer, when I was in Congress, paid far more attention when a group came into my office and somebody in that group was in my district versus if it's just a group that comes, unless I had a real personal interest in it. So the biggest thing I can tell you, I don't have a golden magic bullet here to say, this is the one thing we should have been doing that we have been missing, right? Because we're in a country of 400 million people almost, and we have to operate within that. But the biggest key is to not give up, keep courageous, keep your wits about you, and don't fatigue out. I think that's the main thing.
Thank you. I think that's very astute and wise, having been someone who's worked in cross-partisan advocacy for the past 9 years. And those who've become my most effective advocates over the course of almost a decade are the ones who protect their peace to some extent, who don't spend a lot of excessive time worrying about the things that they can't control, and instead zero in on the things that they feel like they can. And, that was a bit of a self-serving question, because I'm spending the next 2 days on the Hill. And one of the things I'm doing is bringing letters from constituents. And
good, that's really important.
Exactly.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, so you have served our country for a lot of years in many different capacities. In the military and in Congress, and specifically you were on the Foreign Affairs Committee for quite a while. And I learned you came to Salt Lake City in January, and it was right after Venezuela, so you were asked a lot of questions about foreign affairs, and it was really wonderful to hear you talk about that. But in your experience working across these different countries, what have you learned about the practice of democracy from people beyond our shores? Yeah. So I'm thinking about places like Ukraine, I'm thinking about places like Afghanistan, Iraq, like other places. What has that inspired in you?
Listen, that's a great question about what democracy in other places inspired in me. So we often sit around and we're like, oh, I get it. There's these Republican members of Congress that aren't speaking out because they get death threats. Who cares? If you don't want death threats, then you're in the wrong freaking business, right? I mean, honestly, you knew there has been an intervening election between when politics went off the rails and death threats started and your current job in politics. You had a chance to walk away. Like Arby's is hiring if you want to have no death threats, okay? And maybe you get death threats in Arby's. I don't know. Because when I was in like Afghanistan or Iraq, both as a military member, but importantly as a member of Congress that would travel, something always struck me, which was when I walked away, I'd be like, I met with some members of parliament of Afghanistan, for instance, and I'm like, there is a chance that half of them will be killed in the next year. Or I'd be in Iraq, and you'd always hear about a member of parliament that was assassinated by a car bomb or whatever. And people still ran for Congress or parliament because they understood that like their democracy that they were fighting for, whether it would succeed in the country or not, was largely based on whether they were willing to take that stand. So we sit here and we build governments in Iraq and we say, well, gosh, they're not willing to fight for their own country. And our own members of Congress are unwilling to open an email that says, I hate you, I'm going to come after you. By the way, people that are real threats actually don't send death messages. So I'm sorry, like that person's not a threat, okay? And if honestly you don't have the courage to stand up and deal with that and take those threats, then you have no right to tell the Afghanistan government, for instance, that they're not willing to fight hard enough for their country, and so we're going to just abandon them and leave. And so that to me, I think there really could have been, like my willingness to take a stand on the January 6th stuff or on Trump, I think there could have been a little bit of that rubbing off into that decision, which is like, I literally meet with people that are going to die in the course of doing their job. The other thing, I remember in 2022, the Ukrainians were fighting very hard to get fighter jets, and I was kind of leading that charge in Congress. And I met 2 Ukrainian fighter pilots that were very well known. And they came in and talked to me. And I remember, they wore their masks in pictures because they knew that they'd have threats against them and everything else. And I met with them, and I remember when they left, and keep in mind I'm a military pilot, and I remember thinking, I just met the 2 pilots in the military that are most likely to die that I've ever met. And I've been a military pilot for however long at that point, 20 years. And they both did, by the way. And I see that in, young men, now they're pilots, so they're a little older than the average soldier, but young men that knew very well that they could die, and they did. I wear on my wrist the name of Andreas O'Keefe, and he's a friend of mine that was killed in 2018 in Iraq. And actually in my book, That's What Heroes Do, he's in it. And I just I remember thinking, how can we as members of Congress ask people to be willing to die for the country, most of the young people, to give up. It's the end of the movie. It's the end of their story, to die for their country. But we're unwilling to give up a $174,000 a year job because it's our identity and because we want to walk in a room and feel special because we're members of Congress, and we're going to salute a flag-draped coffin that arrives at Dover and pretend to give a rat's a word about any sacrifice any Americans made. And so I say all that to say it has been what the real cost of democracy is that I think has been, for me, the thing that's changed me the most. I always thought democracy was automatic in this country, and I've learned recently it isn't, right? The last thing I'll say is on that is for self-governance to survive, the only thing we need is to agree on the rules of the road. That's it, right? Of the hundreds of people in this room, we can all have a different opinion on every issue. But as long as we agree the rules of the road, here's how elections work, here's how we're going to vote on the issues, then we will survive because we're forced to, work through it. When Donald Trump came along and convinced half of the country that an election was stolen and the system didn't work, you cannot have democracy survive under that. We fought a revolution, and we're proud of it, and we should be proud of it, over the fact that we believe if you're going to tax us, we have to be represented. We fought a revolution over that. and yet you're going to convince half the country that they are unrepresented because their vote isn't counting. That's why things like voting rights is so important. And when we talk about voting rights in minority groups, and we talk about what is it the Republicans are trying to do right now, they're trying to disenfranchise. And when you disenfranchise people, it takes away their voice. If it takes away their voice, it leads to violence.
So I appreciate you bringing up Afghanistan. I mean, when I lived in Omaha, Nebraska, my family helped resettle multiple refugee families from Afghanistan and other countries. But I specifically remember the one family that was an Afghan. They were an interpreter, right? SIV, Special Immigration Visa for the U.S. military. And I remember, I took my 14-year-old son with me to pick him up from the airport, and we had put all their brand new car seats, and we had spent weeks gathering and filling this entire apartment for them so that when they got to America, they would have a safe place to be. And we picked them up, and I just remember the wife, the husband was obviously could speak English very well, right, because he had interpreted for American soldiers, but she couldn't look me in the eye. She was just scared. And we walked them through this apartment, and she had 2 little girls, and I believe she was pregnant at the time, and we went from room to room and showed them the drawers full of clothing, and then the food full of, the cupboards full of food that was their food, right? We went to an Afghan grocery store and got the food, and I watched her gradually over that time start to look me in the eye and kind of come out of her shell, and at the end gave me a big hug. And my experience resettling our Afghan friends was just one of the most compelling experiences that I was able to give my children to experience. But also just, I could see in their eyes how much they appreciated democracy, right? If you want to really do something, go help resettle a refugee family, and that will help you see America through new eyes. So while we're talking a little bit about foreign affairs, when you spoke in Salt Lake, Venezuela was kind of hot off the press. And so at the time, your take was, well, if it went this way, this is a good thing, and if it goes this way, it's a bad thing. Now that the dust is settled a little bit with Venezuela, and then we have some hotspot in Iran, like, what are you thinking about American leadership in those countries right now and how we're exercising our power?
I mean, the sad thing is Venezuela went the wrong way, which is, okay, you capture Maduro, and it was an amazing operation. Let's just say the military did amazing in terms of the ability to do that, and we should be very proud that we have a military that can do that. But the problem is, and when I was in Salt Lake, the point I had mentioned is, well, it depends what happens next. Is it going to be the same regime, or is it going to be the legitimately elected regime or legitimately elected leadership coming in and then holding new elections? And of course, it's the same regime. Right? All Donald Trump did was just change the names at the top of the ticket because for whatever reason, he had a personal beef against Maduro. And I would agree, I would probably assume that 100% of people in here hate Maduro. So they took him, put him in prison, but they basically left the same regime in place. So what's the point now? Well, now we have a Donald Trump friend in Venezuela. And now that leader is probably cut a deal with Donald Trump and his family, if I know how he operates, and I do, which is I'm sure they promised him some financial payoff, to be honest with you. And so that's it. So how do I think about the rest of the world? Well, Iran, I feel the same way. The Iranian regime is terrible, and I do think the Ayatollah will probably be dead within 5 years. And when that happens, there will be regime change. So I don't think the question of regime change is if it happens, it's when. Is it going to happen soon, or is it going to happen in 5 years? What is the most controllable way to do it? There's no real good options in all this. But the thing that concerns me is, okay, if we're going to act in Iran, and guys, I'm pretty hawkish, and so, I wouldn't normally in the past be like, we can't do anything militarily ever. But I also say that with the understanding that if we do act somewhere, we need to have a follow-on play. We need to know what the end game is. It was the mistake we made in Afghanistan and Iraq, right? We're great at the war part. We weren't great at the follow-on part. And in Iran, we'll be great at bombing. Okay, cool, we can blow some stuff up, but it's a big country. The IRGC is big. Now what? What's the follow-on plan? Now maybe we have contacts in the Iranian government that are planning to take over once this starts, and that would, so that's where my concern is I've seen Donald Trump act. He likes very big acts of war, but he doesn't like what it takes to fight a war, right? He wants to capture Maduro and look cool, but he doesn't want to deal with the after effects of that. And I will also say the most important issue in the world right now is very clearly Ukraine. The most important issue. There is, of all the hot spots in the world, if I could only pick one to not go wrong, it would be Ukraine, because it is that important. It is essential for the Ukrainian people who are in a trench. You and I are asked, after 250 years of American history, each generation has their own, challenge or thing they have to do. My grandpa was World War II. My generation was post 9/11. Many generations don't have a war, but they have some challenge, right? It's something. Our generation's challenge right now is like to not give up hope. That is the challenge. And so 250 years of American history, all leading to this moment in time, and you and I don't have a right to give up on this country. Because if my grandpa is going to stare down the Nazis, then you and I don't have a right to be uncomfortable because it's on the news too much, right? Our generation can't be the one this fails. And so I see in Ukraine, what we're being asked to do to defend democracy is to make friends with people that may have a different political view than us, like it's the worst thing in the world. Oh my God, you have a different view of what the top tax rate should be. How, whatever. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, you have a trench where you have one guy that played the piano, somebody else that's like a machinist, somebody else is a college professor, one other person maybe a stay-at-home dad, all fighting in a trench together because they recognize that democracy is not just about not giving up hope, it's about putting their physical life on the line. And so that is why the message in Ukraine and us defending Ukraine is the most important thing ever. If people are willing to die for their freedom, the United States can't abandon them. So yeah.
I think we're going to take maybe one, maybe two questions from the audience before we close out. I've got one over there. We start over there first.
We got the microphone people.
Yeah, we've got a mic coming over.
While they're doing that, let me just say to everybody, thank you for being a member of Principles First, and thank you for being out here. This is incredible, and it grows every year. And just thank you, because this is what gives me hope, and I hope it gives all of you hope that, we're going to get through this, we're going to survive and be all right.
I'm going to start with something that probably only Adam will get in this room, which is go Ironman.
Yeah, no way. Are you from Normal?
Yeah, I'm from Normal.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's our high school mascot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My question for you is, what advice would you have for someone who is interested in statewide or even U.S. Congress, running for office?
Do it. I mean, here's the thing. I had a conversation earlier actually with Trevor and some friends. We had breakfast, and I remember, I was talking a little about politics, and I go, I feel jaded sometimes, and obviously when I speak out and I talk, it's kind of in a jaded way because of what we've been through. But I'm like, when I really look back on it, I actually fully believe in this thing that we have. And one of the things that surprised me the most when I went to Congress was there is no secret cabal of power. You know what I mean? When Donald Trump got reelected, I know we all in here were like, somebody's going to come out and be like, guys, don't worry, we got this. The secret power structure has it. But there isn't. I mean, it's literally run by people that are flawed. We just happen to be able to put together a system that's less flawed than other countries. And so it is essential that we have people that want to do it. And so what my best advice is this, is chase in your life whatever it is you love outside of politics. Because the one thing I don't like, I don't not like it, but I know it hurts people, is they spend their whole life obsessing about running for an office, and then they don't get the opportunity, and they feel like they missed out. So chase whatever that is, and then look for that opportunity when it comes along, and most importantly, don't be afraid to lose. There are a lot of people that don't run because they're afraid of losing. I never lost an election, by the way, so I can't really tell you what that's like. But I'm just saying, never. But yeah, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to lose, and if you lose, don't be afraid to do it again. And don't be embarrassed. When I decided to run for Congress, it took me 6 months to tell people I was running for Congress and not giggle because I had imposter syndrome. I still have imposter syndrome. And so that would be my advice. And do it. Just do it because we need you, especially if you're an Ironman.
That's great. So to close out, we've talked a lot about ordinary patriotic people today, right? And that was intentional because that's who we are in this room here, right? We're ordinary patriotic people doing something truly extraordinary. So, I'm the mother of 3 sons, including one who's training to be a pilot. So he's pretty bummed that he's not here to meet you.
It's the best gig, though, honestly, flying planes.
Yeah. So you're the father of a young boy. And this is a moment in which it's hard to know as a parent of sons how to raise them in an environment in which the leadership they see is coarse and cruel. And we want them to be strong and good, right? And we want them to be kind while those two things are not in opposition. So what are you doing to teach him about how to make a difference and how to be the type of man that you want him to be?
God, these are the questions that cut deep, right? And if you're a parent or a dad, and here especially, you understand that. I think one of the things that's tough for me is we have defined masculinity in this country. We've let the wrong people define it. And it's been defined as are you loud? Are you an alpha? Are you going to take what you want from women? Are you, that? And unfortunately, it's kind of all of our faults in here because for 10 years, everything masculine was called toxic. And so then the whole masculinity space was abandoned. And then the actual toxically masculine people were happy to take over and say, this is masculinity. And so as men in here, we have a responsibility to define masculinity for young men. And masculinity is punching, but it's punching up and not down, right? It is fighting, but it's fighting on behalf of or for people that can't fight for themselves, not fighting people because they're helpless, or it's not celebrating because you're deporting desperate people that are desperate for a better life. I mean, think about this, guys. It's one thing to say we have to deport and we have to control our border, and I agree we have to have border control. It is another thing to put out a tweet from the most powerful man in the world celebrating the sheer cruelty of how you're doing it. Because what? It makes you feel more powerful? Because some guy was so desperate to give his family a better life that they crossed a very dangerous border so he could make less than minimum wage, so he could barely squeak by and give his kids an opportunity, and you're celebrating because your billionaire ass is sitting around feeling tough and powerful, and you need somebody to make you feel that way? What kind of man is that? That is not a man. That is a little tiny baby child, and he is training a whole generation of little baby children. So what... So I wrote this children's book. It's called That's What Heroes Do. And the point of it is to say, look, heroes don't have to put on a military uniform. You don't have to be a fireman or a police officer. Those are all heroes. But a hero is your traits. A hero is somebody that is willing to help people, that is willing to think outside of themselves. And so the only thing I can do, my kid is 4 years old. Obviously, I can't sit down and have deep hearts to heart with him yet, but I'm trying to model and show him that heroism is kindness. Masculinity is kindness. Masculinity is fighting for something that's not yourself. And I hope it helps. So thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Adam.